based on reports from Reuters and Interfax. A Malaysian Airlines flight with about 295 people on board has crashed, we are told.
Не смотри. Что же это такое, а? Баба летала, сука, или что, ничего не пойму. Смотри, дочка.
Тобто вже можна говорити, що він не сам по собі через якісь ушкодження або ж поламки впав на території Донбасу, а саме був збитий?
Безусловно, этот самолет был сбит. Вчера были введены санкции против Российской Федерации очередные. Это ответ его на те санкции, которые были введены.
Obviously, the world is watching reports of a downed passenger jet near the Russia-Ukraine border. And it looks like it may be a terrible tragedy.
Is that an area that a commercial airline should be flying over at all?
You know, I wish that they had thought of that ahead of time.
Хочу звернути вашу увагу, що ми це називаємо не інцидент, не катастрофа, а терористичний.
All evidence shows was perpetrated by the so-called separatists. We call them terrorists, and this crime shows why we do that.
The Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, General Philip Breedlove, he's looking at NATO AWACS airplanes. Those are radar airplanes.
And again, the question now, and we've heard our Nick Pittman-Walsh reporting concerns from Ukrainian officials about their ability to actually get to the crash site. This is obviously essential that officials get to the crash site, not only to get the black box, to recover any other items.
В доме был, слышу гул, взрывы, 2 было взрыва. Выскочил, смотрю, дым черный, думаю, племянника моего накрыло. Выбежал, а оно тут такое черное все, горит все.
How important and what sort of a time frame is it crucial that investigators get access to that site in?
Well, it's critical that they get there as soon as possible for a couple of reasons. One is for the investigations, but most importantly for the humanitarian side, for the recovery of victims.
Well, you can imagine that the Ukrainian air traffic controllers have probably already pulled the tapes, and that they will then transcribe, or it will be given up to Eurocontrol to transcribe that air traffic control conversation.
Подальшому ми оприлюднюємо розмови, де вони обговорюють, терористи, що прибули на місце падіння літака.
Да, майор. Значит, это Чернухинские сбили самолет. Пилотом с Чернухинского блокпоста. Казаки, что на Чернухина стоят.
I'm Patrick Lancaster, and I'm here 60 kilometers from Donetsk in Ukraine. And this is the site of the Malaysian Airlines crash that happened some hours ago.
If it was a missile that took this plane down, then it has to be a very sophisticated weapon system, and the Ukrainians do not have that capability.
When you say the Ukrainians themselves don't have that system, are you talking about the Ukrainian government in Kiev, or are you talking about Ukrainian separatists?
Yes. The Ukrainian government in Kiev.
В Україні вперше відновили зенітно-ракетний комплекс Бук-М1, до якого входить одразу кілька одиниць техніки. Раніше його ремонтували лише в Росії. Там же розробляли і виготовляли запчастини. Ця техніка не працювала 2 роки, не вистачало фахівців і коштів. Враховуючи ситуацію в країні, Міноборони знайшло і гроші, і спеціалістів.
Ремонт проведений якісно, комплекс поставлений в військову частину. Зараз проводиться приймально-здавальне випробування. Після їх завершення комплекс буде готовий виконувати завдання за призначенням.
Даний зенітно-ракетний комплекс застосовується для зенітно-ракетного прикриття від ударів з повітря атомних електростанцій, адміністративно-політичних центрів, міст, угрупувань військ.
Let's talk about the Ukrainian military. They, as we've seen over the past few months, are not in good shape. Were they, let's say that they did have these weapons, which obviously they do.
But again, we don't want to jump to conclusions until we have absolute facts of the case.
продолжении темы оружия Интерфакс, ссылаясь на слова компетентного источника и данные объективного контроля, сообщает, что вчера в район Донецка был перебазирован дивизион противовоздушных комплексов БУК Вооруженных сил Украины.
Но, тем не менее, как в Москве, так и здесь, в Киеве, конечно же, все вспоминают тоже историю 13-летней давности, когда в украинском небе, в небе над Украиной был сбит российский самолет, погибли люди, и было точно известно, что в том районе вели учения украинские военные, но, тем не менее, официальный Киев опровергал тщательно эту версию.
Any party in this conflict has the ability to do this. The Ukrainians shot down mistakenly an airliner, a Siberian Airlines airliner in 2001 over the Black Sea.
Well, the questions I'd be asking is, number one, who could have shot it down? And the Ukrainian government has been quick to blame it on terrorists, which is, their name for the Russian insurgents. And there does seem to be some growing awareness that it probably had to be Russian insurgents. Now, how we determine that will require some forensics.
Они сами говорят о российской возможной агрессии, о том, что они привели свое ПВО и ВВС в полную боевую готовность. И после этого, вот в месте, где они провели свои ПВО и ВВС в полную боевую готовность, они открывают коридор воздушный для гражданских самолетов. На мой взгляд, это, мягко выражаясь, неразумно. А так, в принципе, очень хорошо пахнет спланированной, заранее спланированной провокацией. Любой технический специалист скажет, что ПЗРК или зенитная установка до такой высоты не бьет, никак не может ничего сбить. Другого оружия у нас нету.
Vice President Biden has been on the phone with Poroshenko 4 times in the last couple of weeks.
We're in touch with the Ukrainian government. As I said, I was on the phone for the better part of a half an hour with President Poroshenko.
За моїм дорученням, Генеральний штаб планує зараз передислокацію військ. Ми змінюємо тактику.
The Ukrainian president also confirmed that his government will negotiate with rebels in the east of the country in order to establish a humanitarian corridor to the crash site.
Сьогодні війна вийшла за територію України.
Right now the sun's coming up and the emergency crew has restarted its actions here. I'm not sure if they're waiting on inspectors to come before they start removing the bodies and the debris.
These are emergency service personnel who've been on the scene for a couple of hours this morning. As you can see, they're holding sticks with white cloth on the top of it. They're marking bodies.
The fields are burnt and in them there are bodies and body parts, and they're strewn over a large area of land around here. There's fighting taking place, about 10 kilometers away from here. We can hear the booming taking place. So it's a difficult crime scene, and it's going to be very difficult for the investigators to get in here and do their work.
We assess Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was likely downed by a surface-to-air missile, an SA-11, operated from a separatist-held location in eastern Ukraine.
Прекрасно, пусть предоставляют документы и будем смотреть, какой это пуск, чей это пуск.
When you, Marie, and other officials were talking about missiles along with tanks going from Russia into Ukraine to supply the separatists, did those missiles include SA-11?
I don't think we have specified to that level of detail, Matt.
Нет, самолет не был сбит ополченцами, и это достаточно очевидно. Ополчение не располагает средствами ПВО, которые позволили бы сбить этот самолет.
You don't have any information to share with us about whether you even know for sure that SA-11s were in?
I don't have any specific information about a BUK system making that transit. We're not ruling anything in or out at this point.
Today, tragedy proves again that the terrorism is not local, but global issue. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is not only our problem, but a threat for European and global security.
The Ukrainians do have SA-11 systems in their inventory. However, we are not aware of any Ukrainian SAM systems in the area of the shootdown.
We need to point out that the Russian authorities have, and the defense ministry particularly, has said this morning that it picked up radar transmissions from a Ukrainian missile site at the time that this tragedy happened.
Я вам напомню основной принцип римского права, который действует и сейчас. Кому выгодно это? выгоден этот сбитый самолет.
This is the crime against humanity. All red lines have been already crossed. This is the deadline.
Когда я думаю об этой ситуации, мне вспоминаются слова господина Порошенко о том, что готовит для ополчения сюрприз.
What really jumped out at me and disgusts me, if I may, is today you saw already looters at the scene.
I actually didn't see any looters at the scene myself, to be completely honest.
Кого не сбивали? Видите?
Well, we're going to go back to tonight's this evening and write up what we saw and what we heard. There has to be order reestablished very, very quickly. Those bodies are decomposing, as I said. There's a lot of firepower, and I should add also that we also heard what sounded like missile fire in the background.
Basically, this is the territory which is not under our control, but we do hope that soon everything will be under the control of Ukrainian authorities with the assistance of Ukrainian army.
The Ukrainian government claims that rebels basically carried out some kind of a drive-by shooting in the area, but the video, the images we see, do not look like small arms fire killed these civilians. It looks like it was, again, some kind of artillery, and this taking place today.
Никуда, за що нам таке горе? За що?
Скоро 40 минут.
Оце Порошенку глотку йому треба запхати його сюди.
This is all going on as there are calls right now for a demilitarized zone around the crash site for international investigators to be able to go in. It is a very, very chaotic situation where people and civilians continue to die even in the hours after this plane went down.
Приехали, вот люди видят, стоят люди в панике, они успокаивают, рассказывают, так и так, все хорошо будет, сейчас вас соберут, эвакуируют. Они, стараются нам помочь, спасти.
Сегодня в 3:30 утра приблизительно нефтеперерабатывающий завод был обстрелян системами ГРАД Украинской национальной гвардии. Никакого вреда не представляет, в нем находится шрапнель, он когда разрывается, вылетает больше сотни шариков, которые разлетаются.
The least the president can do is to make a damn decision for once in his life, announce that we are now going to supply lethal weapons to assist the Ukrainians in defending themselves and in completing the offensive that is now going on in eastern Ukraine to actually destroy the rebel insurgents.
Well, Charles, a moment ago you said a minute ago that the Ukrainian army has performed well. And guess who's back in the Ukrainian army? It's our CIA, it's our government, it's the Europeans that the president has mobilized.
Необходимо беспристрастное, открытое расследование случившегося. Не следует оказывать давление на такое расследование, пытаясь предрешать его итоги громкими заявлениями и необоснованными инсинуациями.
We intercepted a number of phone calls and we intercepted a number of messages in the internet.
The engagement of a range of countries and organizations, I think, in our view, makes it an international process, but of course Ukraine would have the lead in the investigation.
And the final say in the outcome of the investigation is in terms of ascriptions of culpability and so forth.
We've been hearing these reports about gunfire and explosions near the crash site. You were there earlier, and I understand you heard mortar fire yourself?
Yeah, Christy, we did. It was mortar fire, some form of artillery fire, indirect fire, something like that. It was in the near distance, certainly very audible from where we were directly at the crash site itself. And just another reminder that this accident, this terrible tragedy has taken place within a war zone, within an ongoing conflict area, and it is yet another complication in trying to get the people and the resources that are so desperately needed to that area to recover bodies and find out precisely what happened.
71-я школа, да?
Да.
Это твоя школа?
Моя, да, моя.
Ага. Бомба прилетела туда, да?
Ну да. Бедная школа просто. С ума.
Так давайте. Падла, Порошенко, снимаешь ты, падла, чтоб ты сдох.
Уймо, самый настоящий. Не
падай.
Только уже сутки, двое, сколько?
Сюда надо, Порошенко.
Вчера же сразу, это 3 залпа было одинаково.
Да, они вот один, второй и третий.
И минометный был огонь, он слышно был этот свист.
А потом, когда уже встали после третьего, видим здесь дым. А после дым как прошел, раз видим люди, ну, видно, что лежат люди, сюда побежали с рынка, мужики наши пошли сюда, смотрели, сразу скорую стали звонить, вызывать.
Artillery has reportedly been used in the rebel-held city of Lugansk. The Ukrainian government claims that at least 5 Ukrainian soldiers were killed there in the last 5 days, more than 20 wounded, and on Friday, at least 16 Ukrainian civilians were killed in that city. Of course, a reminder that this plane went down in what is an active, hot, and dangerous war zone.
Упала мина, складское помещение. Горел магазин, склады.
Пострадавшие есть?
Пострадавших нет, потому как это было ночью, здесь все разошлись по домам. Приехали утром, ребята все затушили, да, уехали, ну и потом где-то какой-то был опять очаг возгорания.
The delegation from Malaysia arrived in Kiev this morning, from where they're attempting to negotiate access to the site. They'll be joined by 8 British air accident investigators later today.
Any action that prevents us from learning the truth about what happened to MH17 cannot be tolerated. Failure to stop such interference would be a betrayal of the lives that we lost. Malaysia calls for all parties to protect the integrity of the crash site and to allow the investigation to proceed.
This area is certainly more controlled than it was, though you wouldn't say it's exactly closed off for a proper investigation. The separatists are keeping people back while the recovery operation gets underway for bodies. Now, this is being carried out by the emergency services from Ukraine. They've got a huge amount of work to do. The hope is, of course, that there will be a ceasefire here so that they can get proper international investigators inside.
Мы хотим, чтобы они как можно скорее оказались бы на месте происшествия. Однако нам было заявлено, что эти группы, да, это группа из 81 человека, она будет сегодня в Киеве совещаться о чем-то. И только завтра, возможно, завтра прибудут к месту событий.
If they not allow us to go to the site, I think this is inhumane. For we are looking at on the humanitarian ground. That's why we are calling the United Nations to assist the ceasefire, and also to ensure we are asking the Ukraine authority to ensure us the safe corridor to the site, and this must be done immediately.
4 эксперта с украинской стороны уже прибыли. Они были вчера на месте происшествия, будут и сегодня. Они сейчас в пути туда на место происшествия вместе с 14 представителями ОБСЕ.
Well, we're right now, this is our second day here. We were here yesterday for about 75 minutes. Today we're getting more access. We're seeing parts of the debris field that we have not seen before. Right now, as I speak to you, we're looking at a very, very badly damaged piece of earth. The new development today was that they are what they described as experts, so-called experts here. They brought body bags with them, and they're moving the bodies at least to the side of the road.
We have then this morning come back here. You have been waiting for us. You have seen us coming. We have now had the possibility to see a bit more of this rather large scene.
Ukraine authority workers came in, and local miners came in with their helmets and outfits being very identifiable. And they then started rounding up the bodies in their trucks here, and they're loading the body bags on the trucks, and they're transporting them out. It's a difficult thing to watch, but it's really important that it's happening. And even though it's being done crudely and they're not being put in, refrigerated or any type of vehicles that are meant for this, they are being taken out of the ground, they are being put onto the trucks, and they are being taken away. I don't know where, we're trying to find out.
Colonel Francona, I'd like to start with you. There's been a stream of evidence coming from Ukrainian intelligence. They've been sharing some of it with me here. You have these intercepted phone calls as the plane was shot down, apparently as this missile system was delivered. You have the video that Poppy was talking about, seeming to show the missile system being sent back over the border into Russia after the plane was shot down. And there are new photographs, which we're going to share with our viewers shortly, that the Ukrainians have put out, showing not one but 3 Buk missile systems going back over the border into Russia. You're a military intelligence officer. When you look at this stuff, granted we're in the middle of an information war here between these two sides, but when you look at this, do you consider this credible?
Well, I have to tell you, in doing this for a long time, this seems very convenient to me that all of this information comes out just when you need it. And it's all the damning information that you would need. It just bolsters their case. Now, I'm not saying it's suspect, and the Pentagon has even said they have no reason to doubt it, but I just still, the timing of the whole thing bothers me. It's just too easy. I mean, having done this for a long time, it's never this good.
Let me help you out with a few things. First, it's 4 o'clock in the morning here right now. Small arms fire is coming from this way, but more troubling, we're hearing heavy artillery come from the direction of the crash site. Now, that's a problem because that region is very hot with conflict, and it may make it more difficult for the OSCE and investigators to get in there, so we'll keep monitoring that situation.
Right now, we're in the forest within the perimeter of the MH17 flight that went down.
When dawn broke yesterday morning, we were surrounded by bodies still in these fields. Since then, all of those visible bodies have been packed up and taken away.
We have seen developments from the very first day, including now the continuous removal of bodies. And in that context, I can also inform you that earlier today we were at a railway station a bit out of this location, and we have seen and witnessed ourselves 4 wagons, of which 3 were loaded with what we understand 196 bodies in refrigerated conditions.
For the moment, the train, the carriages where the bodies are refrigerated is stationary. We were given indications that it will remain that way pending the arrival of the international experts, and then from there, decisions will be made where it can go.
Reuters has just released video that appears to show a Ukrainian man there at the scene with a recovered black box.
Мы ждем представителей специализированной организации, в данном случае это ИКАО, которым готовы передать эти предметы технического оборудования самолета.
If the experts decide on their own accord to move in, we are prepared to carry them, but that will be done by their discretion because OSCE cannot guarantee that security. It will be at their own risk.
Вот сейчас, если не ошибаюсь, уже вот скоро начнется 4-й сутки, да, с момента этого происшествия. Вот где эти специалисты? И от Киева сюда дороги на автомобиле 4-5 часов, в зависимости от того, как едут, с какой скоростью.
You may have heard in the past days sounds of conflict and gunfire in the not far distance. You also know that we are close to what is referred to as a ever-moving front line. So there is, of course, a risk that this area here will be made subject also to this conflict.
Ну, то есть они обещали там какое-то перемирие на время расследования.
А зачем нам их перемирие?
Не знаю.
А их здесь вообще сделать нечего. Чемодан, вокзал России – это в лучшем случае.
Но вот потому, на самом деле, намерения официального Киева пока что сохраняются неизменными, так сказать, не с последних сил. Им все равно, сбит самолет, не сбит самолет, погибли люди, не погибли люди. Здесь уже огромное количество людей погибло, вы поймите. Эти 300 человек, почти 300 человек, которые погибли несколько дней тому назад, они не первые, и боюсь, что не последние жертвы невинной этой войны. Здесь погибло огромное количество невинных людей, таких же мирных граждан. Ну, они не граждане Малайзии, не граждане Нидерландов, да, они граждане, собственно говоря, официально считались гражданами Украины, а вообще-то это жители Донбасса. Но это тоже мирные люди, и среди них тоже много женщин и детей. Они погибли, это Киев никак не смущает. Почему гибли еще 300 людей, даже если у них паспорта европейские или малазийские, должна их смутить?
Сука, урод! Пиздец! Саня, давай в тачку быстрей!
Today we have reports of drunken separatists, I mean literally drunken separatist soldiers, piling the remains of people, stacking bodies into the back of trucks. Here's what's currently bothering everybody. Drunken separatists have been piling bodies into trucks. The so-called defense minister, self-appointed of the People's Republic of Donetsk, Mr. Igor Strelkov, actually posted a social media bragging about the takedown of a military transport. And then when it became apparent it was civilian, he then quickly removed it from the social media. When, you know, there's a buildup of extraordinary circumstantial evidence. You know, I'm a former prosecutor. I've tried cases on circumstantial evidence. It's powerful here. But even more importantly, we picked up the imagery of this launch. We know the trajectory. We know where it came from. We detected a launch from this area. We have the trajectory recorded. We know they have the system. We know that they had this system to a certainty on Monday the 14th beforehand because the social media was reporting it and tracking it. Social media, which is an extraordinary tool obviously in all of this, has posted recordings of separatists bragging about the shoot down of a plane at the time, right after it took place.
Мы не хотели сбивать самолет, и у нас не было такой технологической возможности, ни физической возможности такой не было. Мы понимаем, что этот самолет сбит украинскими ВВС или украинскими ПВО.
We think this is a wake-up call for countries in Europe. We hope this is a wake-up call for some countries in Europe that have been reluctant to move because we have 4% of Russia's trade is with the United States. 50% of their engagement is with Europe. So we are trying to encourage our European friends to realize this is a wake-up call. And hopefully they will also join us in these tougher sanctions.
Do we have definitive proof that the Russians were directly involved in the downing of this airliner?
Well, Bob, when you say definitive proof, the Russian, the investigation is going to draw conclusions that are, quote, definitive.
We don't have our schedule yet for today. We'll be heading out soon, but I suspect that the train station will again be another stop just so we can report on what we saw. We've reported the presence of more than 100 small armed groups with many armed men, and they aren't. I just have to tell you right now that we did hear some what seemed like heavy weapon firing in the background as well.
And what we were hearing just then was the outbreak of fighting as Ukrainian government forces launched an assault on Donetsk to break the rebels' control of the city.
Loud explosions have been heard in the center of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. A separatist leader said government forces were trying to enter the rebel-controlled city and that fighting was underway near a railway station.
Railway station.
An official from the rebels' self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic said at least 4 tanks and armoured vehicles were trying to break in. The Ukrainian military wouldn't comment, saying only that the general operation against the separatists was in an active phase.
The zone of control around the airport of Donetsk is broadening, and in general the anti-terrorist forces are holding initiative.
Ukrainian army tanks were reported to be launching an assault to break pro-Russian rebels' hold on the eastern city of Donetsk on Monday. This is the first major outbreak of hostilities in the area since Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 was shut down last week.
Now, in many directions, including to Donetsk, when block approaches into the city, and we destroy checkpoints of terrorists.
Мы, как и видим, машина не имеет отношения ни к ополченцам, ни к чему. Это сама воронка, получается, в асфальте. Вот мы видим внутри болванку. Но мы слышим на слух, что продолжается еще артобстрел градом.
Was it wise to begin military action in Donetsk this morning?
There is no indication of any kind of military activity or counter-terrorist operation at the area of crash site. We do understand our responsibility, because the key priority is to collect all evidences and to have thorough investigation.
So clarify, can the Ukrainian government guarantee no military action along the route that the train must take in order to get to Kharkiv?
Минометный обстрел ведется до сих пор. Вот, собственно, дом от цехов Тучмаши, дым от цехов Тучмаши.
Бомбить территорию, там, откуда не эвакуированы обычные жители. А если нас бомбят, то они все не с нами. Они, походу, вся Украина против нас. Я не знаю, почему.
We realised the roads had all been cut off to the station, so we thought we'd take a back route to that area. And the shelling had pretty much started. Now, we were running along a laneway with everybody else, locals included. We were offered sanctuary in a basement, and these are extraordinary scenes. There are basements that are built into the outside of buildings, so they're accessible literally from the pavement. You can just duck down, and these basements are huge. They take up to 100 people. So we went into one near a school. It is holidays here at the moment, but there were 70-odd kids under that building taking sanctuary as mortar shells were falling everywhere. I mean, they were just being fired indiscriminately. People were running across parks. They had these beautiful little courtyard parks in the middle of these tall apartment blocks. And very tragically, as we walked along the park, a local there said, "You better see this," knowing we were foreign media. And there was a lady who, moments earlier had been walking across that courtyard, and she was dead. Further along the road, another two bodies, 2 men standing on a roadway. They fell where a mortar dropped. And then further along still, another man who presumably had heard the whistles from the mortar and was trying to take cover.
There's a period of quiet now, but the shelling is bound to start again. What seems to be happening is that there is fighting going on around the airport area, and also there's been an attack of some kind on a building near the train station, and that's just up here.
In the suburbs of Donetsk, our military men succeeded to capture main roads to Donetsk.
So part of the suburb of Donetsk, Pisky, is taken under control. That allows to ensure the protection of the reservoir, which is so important for water supply to this region.
Our colleagues on the ground in Donetsk are seeing shelling from the airport.
the area of the airport, which is under the control of the Ukrainian forces, toward the rail station. Could you clarify the point you told us earlier about the government forces not firing, not shelling within the city? That appears not to be the case at this point from the eyewitness accounts we're hearing.
Сегодня 21 число, там, по-моему, ЖД вокзал. Сейчас из окруженного аэропорта пытаются фашисты прорваться. К ним подошла помощь. Стреляют по Донецку с градов, стреляют по Донецку с минометов. Мы держимся, что еще здесь можно сказать. Людей эвакуировали в убежище. Пытаемся как-то их спасти. Про себя не думаем, в основном думаем про людей. Это наша основная задача.
Here in Dzержinsk, Ukraine, and I was called this morning and informed that the Ukrainian army will be coming into Dzержinsk to eradicate the separatists.
There's a building and I can see flames coming out of the top of the building.
You can hear the planes flying overhead. They came in for an airstrike. There it goes. It's right there. Yeah, there it goes, it's firing.
In Dzержinsk, above the municipal administration, the state flag of Ukraine is hoisted. The Ukrainian military localize and eliminate the rest of the terrorists and bandits.
But they still control the area. And they still control the railway station in Torres City, with which we, with the guns and barrels and grenade launchers. This is the way how they control the area.
Today we have Peter Van Vliet. He's the team leader of the forensic expert team from the Netherlands.
I have watched the train and the wagons, and I think the storage of the bodies is good of quality.
The train is going on transport. We don't know the time, we don't know the destination, but we got the promise the train is going.
Literally minutes ago, we got news that Dutch investigators have now arrived at the scene of the plane crash.
You're seeing what's happening here right now. This is what, in a way, we've been waiting for. The OSCE is now joined by Dutch investigators. This is all happening amid reports that fighting has been renewed in Donetsk, where we all just came from, that Ukraine is trying to retake that city.
So on the first day we arrived here, we did come to the site. It was a bit chaotic, but that got better the next day, and then yesterday and today. Today we have 3 Dutch forensics experts with us, and they're getting pretty much unfettered access.
I'm impressed about the size of the crash site, about the tragedy that has to be going on, and I'm very impressed about the work what is done over here, seeing the means and the people who did it, and the weather and the circumstances. I think they did a hell of a job in a hell of a place.
As I said before, you have international teams already in place prepared to conduct the investigation and recover the remains of those who have been lost. But unfortunately, the Russian-backed separatists who control the area continue to block the investigation. They've repeatedly prevented international investigators from gaining full access to the wreckage. As investigators approached, they fired their weapons into the air. These separatists are removing evidence from the crash site, all of which begs the question, what exactly are they trying to hide? Moreover, these Russian-backed separatists are removing bodies from the crash site, oftentimes without the care that we would normally expect from a tragedy like this. This is an insult to those who've lost loved ones.
The last couple of days, we've received very disturbing reports of bodies being moved about and looted for their possessions. Just for 1 minute, not addressing you as representatives of your countries, but as husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, just imagine that you first get the news that your husband was killed. And then within 2 or 3 days, you see images of some thug removing the wedding band from their hands.
This is not the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. This is the global conflict, and this is the global threat. Russia is on the dark side.
Christian, I don't see any differences from the tragedy 9/11, from the tragedy of Lockerbie, and from the tragedy of Grabova on Ukrainian side, on the Ukrainian sky.
What DOD reported to me is that to get this target and to shoot down the plane, they need to work in collaboration with another radar systems that we don't have on Ukrainian territory.
Earlier this evening, I spoke to Alexander Borodai, who is in command of the region where the tragedy occurred. We have agreed the following. The train will depart this evening. The 2 black boxes will be handed over to a Malaysian team in Donetsk who will take custody of them. Thirdly, independent international investigators will be guaranteed safe access to the crash site to begin a full investigation of the incident.
It is 1:20 in the morning.
Ну а сейчас, собственно, вы увидите процедуру передачи черных ящиков малазийской стороне.
On behalf of the government of Malaysia, I would like to convey our sincere appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Borodai. Our priority now is first is the body, second is the black box. В настоящий момент у нас 3 задачи. Это переправка.
Now they'll take those black boxes. Also aboard this train are the bodies of some 200 of the victims from the accident.
When it finally arrives here at the railway station, it will be met by a number of Dutch experts we've seen coming into the airport here.
In Kharkov, there will be preparations so that the identification process in the Netherlands can be done as well as possible.
Zodra een aantal slachtoffers klaar is.
As soon as a number of victims is ready for transport, a plane will leave for Eindhoven. The hope and expectation is that tomorrow, at the end of the day, the first plane will leave for Eindhoven. The phased transport of bodies will continue until all remains on the train in Kharkov have arrived in the Netherlands.
Well, right now, Malaysian experts are in the field, just up the road from me here.
I'm here at one of the 8 crash scenes, the biggest one, and in fact, I'm standing just a few meters away from the tail section of the aircraft that came down. And just behind it are 3 representatives of Malaysian Airlines who just arrived to the site with us for the first time. We have now brought 3 different groups of experts. The Ukrainian experts from day one. Yesterday, the Dutch forensic experts accompanied us. And today, 3 Malaysian experts have accompanied us, and they have gotten in and out of this area without much trouble at all.
While we were there, you were talking about rockets in your previous segment. There was quite a bit of heavy weaponry fire in the distance. We could see a big kind of mushroom cloud, and we could definitely hear it. You can imagine the impact that had on the Malaysians.
They could smell the presence of death as they moved through the wreckage and hear the rockets falling in the distance.
Сушка украинская, город Первомайск, Луганской области. 2 часа 50 минут. Летит сирена на заводе Карла Маркса. Были взрывы, 3-й раз заход делает, по ней отрабатывают. Бабушка с дома!
июля 1914 года. Город Луганск, квартал Комарова, 32-й дом. Человек лежит, да.
Сходил дедушка за булочкой хлеба. Порошенко, ты убийца, тварь. Тут двое погибших, да?
Квартал Комарова. Квартира, дом 32А. 48. Пятый этаж. Снаряд попал прямо в крышу на кухню. Вчера потеряла, сейчас лежит у меня на улице. Не приходит в себя, не дышит. Но все это набело. Держитесь, я скоро зайду к вам. Держитесь.
Вот у нас такое бомбоубежище, заходите.
Президент и своих граждан Украины уничтожают. В самом настоящем убивают.
Не задача сейчас зачистить.
Мирные дома.
И мы то по подвалам утекаем сразу. То есть нужно разрезать их коммуникации и освободить нам коридоры, правильно?
Чтобы коридор освободить, самое главное просто навести порядок, чтобы у нас было меньше кровопролития. То есть нужно просто прекратить, чтобы меньше бомбили городами мирных жителей, города Луганск, тоже Славянск, что превратили. Нам нужно прекратить поставку этой техники ударом туда, потому что они воюют не по правилам воинского искусства, они просто бомбят мирных жителей. То есть в открытом бою вот они не более там, вы видите, не более они выходят в открытый бой, они только воюют по правилам американских инструкторов.
And there are also several reports that the Ukrainian military has continued to issue attacks in eastern Ukraine, despite everything going on with the investigation. What kind of information do you have on that? And has the U.S. said anything whatsoever to Kiev authorities about a ceasefire?
Well, the president of Ukraine is committed to a 40-kilometer ceasefire around the crash site, and I believe the fighting is outside of that 40 kilometers. I think he's held to it.
The Europeans today met, the European Council met and said that they were going to expand and enhance.
Visa bans, asset freezes. Yep.
Correct. I presume that you think that's a good thing?
We do.
This meeting today is an opportunity for us to send a very clear signal to Russia. The world has changed since the European Council last week.
Deeply saddened by the downing of the Malaysian airliner in eastern Ukraine last Thursday, EU Foreign Affairs ministers meeting today in Brussels welcomed the unanimous adoption of the UN Security Council resolution.
We today decided to accelerate the preparation of targeted measures agreed at the summit last week. In particular, to put in place very quickly a list of entities and people, including from Russia, under the new enhanced criteria.
Now we are in a completely different dimension.
As far as we are concerned, something fundamental has changed since last Thursday.
En wat Nederland betreft.
And as far as the Netherlands is concerned, all options are now on the table.
Does Ukraine's government feel shared responsibility because of the ongoing conflict and what the militiamen say is constant attacks of eastern towns? Do you believe you share responsibility for creating an atmosphere of violence that led to the shooting down of the plane?
Not at all. Вчера, когда ополченцы передавали так называемые черные ящики, вооруженные силы Украины устроили танковую атаку на город Донецк. Нужно в конце концов призвать и киевские власти к соблюдению элементарных норм порядочности, ввести хотя бы на какое-то короткое время для расследования прекращения огня.
My government will do everything for peace and stability. But to get peace, you have to fight. This is the formula.
Now there are battles to liberate Lysychansk.
Дверь прикрывайте.
Yesterday, the intel community said they were going to lay out evidence, sort of backing their assertions about who brought down Malaysia Airlines 17. They did lay out a bunch of different things, but they didn't actually lay out the real documentation that supports those assertions.
Высокопоставленные представители национальной разведки США попросили не упоминать их имен.
If you just look at that, a layperson looking at it, it's a line drawn on a satellite photo with nothing to back it up. Anyone can draw a line on a map. They can. I mean, I'm not saying
that's not what our intelligence community does.
The United States spends $100 billion a year on global intelligence, and they can't find out. This is extraordinary. There are NATO ships in the Black Sea watching Ukraine like a hawk.
They will say that's all you have is social media and some conversations that could have been manufactured with all the money and surveillance capabilities and intelligence capabilities of the U.S. That's the best you can do.
Нам удалось пообщаться с человеком, ставшим жертвой одной из украинских подделок. Речь идет о фальшивой, смонтированной из разных кусков якобы записи переговоров зенитчиков, сбивших Боинг.
Так грубо была сляпана эта информация. А здесь такое ощущение, что в спешке взяли первую попавшую фотографию, лишь бы выиграть время, ухудшили ее качество, чтобы трудно было опознать, и сделали вброс информационный.
Look, the separatists and some of their backers would say that this conversation is not happening. They'll say we invent anything. The fact of the matter is, when you lay it all out, when you see how we come about bringing the evidence together, for example, the social media.
Окружив по близлежащим полям, следов запуска ракеты нам найти не удалось. Не видели бук и встреченные нами местные жители. Жители близлежащих сел уверяют, что видели в небе боевые самолеты незадолго до катастрофы. Именно истребители, по их мнению, могли сбить Боинг.
И рядом еще один был самолет военный, все видели.
Который заходил. Он, видать, рядом с ним шел, и потом зашел вот так вот ему. Прошло несколько секунд, и
and few seconds after the explosion happened.
И потом этот самолет вот так вот резко развернулся, поменял траекторию и поехал, все полетело вот в ту сторону.
В 100 метрах отсюда находится место падения того самого авиалайнера. Люди здесь живут, но они все попрятались по домам, потому что здесь каждый день летают Су-25 украинских ВВС.
Вчера где-то часа в 2 вообще там тоже слышали взрывы. Тут были еще, как комиссия была. Дитё боится спать. Она пугается, она кричит во сне.
Видели пару самолетов, но не поняли, что за модели.
Украинская армия так и не присоединилась к прекращению огня, который в одностороннем порядке соблюдают ополченцы. Находиться на месте катастрофы становится все опаснее. В том числе и из соображений безопасности сотрудники ОБСЕ и авиационные эксперты из Малайзии не приехали сегодня на место, где находятся самые крупные части Боинга. Они изменили свой маршрут в последний момент. Пока шла работа, в небе на большой высоте летал по кругу штурмовик Су-25 украинских ВВС.
We definitely heard those jets above us. Well, we heard, I don't know if it was those particular ones, but we did hear aviation above us. And don't forget that this is basically a no-fly zone for commercial aviation. And we did have kind of a mini alert. We did not leave the area, that noise left, but we did hear some heavy explosions. It wasn't, I don't think it was that far away.
Ukrainians have maintained a ceasefire. The 40-kilometer ceasefire they have declared around the crash site.
2 Ukrainian fighter jets just shot down over eastern Ukraine. That comes from the Ukrainian government.
Это фрагмент сбитого ополченцами украинского штурмовика. Он успел сделать лишь пару боевых заходов на позиции самообороны, как его подбили. Парашют одного из летчиков сначала видели в небе, а потом и нашли на земле недалеко от деревни Мариновка.
И на сегодняшний день это одно из основных направлений, на которых отряды ополчения ведут наступление с тем, чтобы выйти на российскую границу.
Сбитые украинские самолеты, а еще и артиллерия, наносили превентивные удары, чтобы максимально затруднить последний бросок ополченцев вперед.
На Прикарпатті масові акції протестів. Головні учасники – родичі чоловіків, які отримали повістки із військкоматів.
Попереджають, якщо влада їх не почує, підуть до Києва.
Є мобілізація, чи буде, чи не буде.
Будет мобилизация или не будет, я своему мужу не позволю идти туда, где сплошная мясорубка.
У меня 4 детей, это старший, это младший. И моего мужа забирают.
По тому же самому каналу, но чуть позже, рекламный ролик украинской армии. Хорошо экипированный актер смело идет в атаку среди рвущихся снарядов. Так себе и представляют армию многие новобранцы.
Армия – це гордість.
Армия – это гордость для тех, кто служит, и тех, кто ждет.
And by the way,
if we really went at it, we could get American energy to Europe and to Ukraine within 2 to 3 years if we did all the right things.
This afternoon, Ukrainian time, the first remains will go by military aircraft, including an Australian C-17, to the Netherlands.
The first bodies from Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 arriving back home on Dutch soil. The families of those victims will welcome their return, as will government officials and even Dutch royals.
Dear God, we are thinking of the victims. We are thinking of all those who are so much, very much missed. We trust that you know them, even in their death, that you are loyal to your people, also in death, that they who fell will not pass through your fingers.
We've been listening to some of the memorial services that have begun, that one in St. Joris Church in Amersfoort. Let's listen in.